Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolutely most incredible survival stories ever told. Seriously, we're going on a 2 billion-year problem-solving journey. It's just this continuous, epic saga of adaptation, survival, and the sheer tenacity of life on Earth.
Think about it for a second. How did Earth go from simple single-celled microbes floating around to giant dinosaurs and eventually to self-aware humans like you and me? It's a massive evolutionary puzzle, right? Just a timeline packed with unbelievable hurdles and brilliant biological solutions. Okay, let's dive into this.
To make sense of this whole tapestry, we're breaking it down into 4 distinct eras today. First, the spark of early life. Second, colonizing the dry land. Third, the era of reptiles. And fourth, extinction and mammalian rise. So jumping right into Section 1, the spark of early life, we are winding the clock all the way back to roughly 2 billion years ago. Now, to really grasp the story of evolution, we kind of have to anchor ourselves in deep time. 2 billion years ago, the very first cellular organisms emerged from complex macromolecules. Life started incredibly small and, well, it stayed that way for a very long time, just slowly building up this incredible biological momentum. I mean, it wasn't until about 500 million years ago that we start seeing the rise of multicellular invertebrates in the water. And then, at the 350 million year mark, jawless fish and primitive plants finally show up. Think about that. Hundreds of millions of years of life just figuring out the absolute basics of existing. But those early cells, they faced a massive survival obstacle right out of the gate, which was harnessing energy. Now, what's really interesting about this is how they solved that energy crisis. They developed an ability akin to photosynthesis. They literally used light-harvesting pigments to grab solar energy and just split water molecules apart. And by splitting that water to get what they needed, they released a super important byproduct, oxygen. That tiny microscopic act of survival laid the atmospheric foundation for literally everything that followed.
Which brings us to Section 2, colonizing the dry land, or, the Great Migration of leaving the oceans.
So around 350 million years ago, the oceans were getting pretty crowded, and life needed a new frontier. Interestingly enough, primitive plants and seaweeds were actually the first to make that aggressive land grab, kind of paving the way for terrestrial life. And once the plants were there, well, some fish developed these incredibly sturdy fins. And these weren't just for swimming anymore, they were for actually exploring those muddy shores. This eventually allowed the ancestors of lobed-finned fish to evolve into early amphibians, laying the complete groundwork for modern frogs and salamanders.
Oh, and speaking of those sturdy-finned pioneers, we absolutely have to talk about the coelacanth. This is a remarkable fish that scientists genuinely believed was completely extinct. Done. But miraculously, no way, it was rediscovered alive and well in 1938. It's a brilliant illustration of the sheer resilience of these ancient species. They didn't just pave the way for us, some of them are still quietly swimming right alongside us today.
Moving right along to Section 3, the era of reptiles, where life faced what we call the dryness dilemma.
So, amphibians had made it to land, but they had this major limitation. They were still tied to aquatic environments to survive and reproduce. They just couldn't venture too far inland. So, the crucial point is the evolutionary upgrade that reptiles brought to the table: the thick-shelled egg. I mean, this was an absolute game changer. By laying thick-shelled eggs that wouldn't dry out or desiccate in the harsh sunlight, reptiles totally solved the dryness dilemma. They could finally leave the water's edge in the rearview mirror and truly conquer dry land.
And once they conquered the land, they absolutely did not hold back. Reptiles dominated the terrestrial landscape for an epic 200 million years. During this reign, the world was covered in flourishing giant fern forests. And those forests supported this incredible diversity of shapes and sizes, culminating in awe-inspiring giant predators like the T-Rex. Though, ironically, some reptiles like the ichthyosaurs worked so incredibly hard to adapt to dry land, only to turn around and evolve right back into aquatic marine creatures. I guess evolution always keeps you guessing, right? But of course, every era comes to an end. This leads us to Section 4, Extinction and Mammalian Rise, or what we can call the Great Reset. 65 million. 65 million years ago, that's when the magnificent 200 million year reign of the giant dinosaurs came to an abrupt, sudden halt. A massive mass extinction event just wiped the evolutionary slate incredibly clean. Just like that, the awe-inspiring giants simply disappeared from the terrestrial landscape.
Now, the exact cause of this abrupt disappearance remains a subject of heavy debate among experts. Some hypotheses point to severe climatic changes that altered the environment way too rapidly for the large reptiles to adapt. Other perspectives highlight that, well, perhaps they didn't entirely disappear, but rather experienced an evolutionary transition into modern birds. But regardless of the exact mechanism, the result was this massive biological vacuum on Earth. The giants were gone, and the stage was perfectly set for someone else entirely.
Enter the new protagonists of our evolutionary explainer. As the massive reptiles faded from the scene, the earliest mammals emerged. They were small, pretty unassuming, shrew-like creatures, but they had an incredible survival advantage, this unique ability to carry and protect their young inside their bodies. While thick-shelled eggs were great, internal gestation provided an unprecedented level of protection in a really chaotic, constantly changing world.
With the reptiles in decline, these small underdogs kicked off an incredible evolutionary sprint. First, mammals rapidly began to thrive and adapt to incredibly diverse terrestrial environments all across the globe. Then, in yet another stroke of evolutionary irony, some mammals decided the land wasn't for them anymore and transitioned entirely back to aquatic life, giving us whales and dolphins. And finally, this rich tapestry brings us right into our own living rooms, the emergence of humans. We really stand out on this vast biological tree for our advanced language skills and our unique self-awareness.
Which really brings us to the most fascinating thought of all. We are the current result of single-celled microbes splitting water for oxygen, fish crawling through mud, and tiny mammals protecting their young from the cold. With 2 billion years of constant, unstoppable adaptation behind us, where will evolution take us next? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you look at the world around you today. Thanks